Hopefully it's good. We'll see. We'll see at the end of class whether you think it's still good. We're still continuing our study of the ministry of Christ. And we're in Matthew and Luke because it's near the beginning, and that's where you have a lot of the detail in the beginning is in Matthew and Luke. And we'll get into John and Mark a little bit later. We've starting on slide 30 because that's where we got to, or we finished up last time. We'll see how far we get this morning. We just finished the sermons that he had, the sermon in Luke and the sermon in Matthew. And now we're finishing up that last part of that, and we're going into the next part. But prayer and treating each other. So this piece is only in Matthew, where he talks about how you basically treat each other. That didn't work. That's a good reason why. Matthew, ask, it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and you will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks, it will be opened. Or what person is there among you who, when his son asks for a loaf of bread, will give him a stone? If he asks for a fish, he will not give him a snake, will he? So, if you, despite being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more is your Father who is in heaven give you things to those who ask him? In everything, therefore, treat people the same way they want them to treat you. For this is the law and the prophets. So he's talking about asking in the first part of this one. Matter of fact, most of the verses here, 7 through 11, is talking about asking, and you'll receive. Do you always get what you ask for? No. What is it he's saying you need to ask for? Prayers for other people. He says, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be opened to you. Why did he come? Why did Christ come? To save us. To provide us the truth. Both of those things, okay? In his ministry, he's providing the truth. Truth where everybody could understand it. If you're seeking after it, you're going to find it, right? But if you're not seeking after it, you're not going to find it. That's kind of the converse. The things that he's asking for, that you're asking for here, aren't purely physical. Are we here to serve God, or is God here to serve us? God's here to serve us? No. We're here to serve God. You got it back. You meant it the other way, I know. Yeah, okay. People get into a mindset that says, well, I asked for God and he didn't give it to me. He's not here to serve you. You're here to serve him. Okay. Did Paul pray for something that he never got? Yeah, okay. Yeah, 3 times he says, hey, my grace is sufficient. So the prayer that's here is, if you ask a question to your parents, you got one of 3 answers, right? You got yes, you got no, you got maybe. Maybe was a real close relative of no. That's true. That's true. And the Spirit helps us with that, doesn't it? He helps us with that. But this isn't the kind of thing where, well, God's not answering my prayers. Is no an answer? It wasn't my house when I grew up. Okay. How about the last part? In everything, treat people the same way you want to treat you, for this is the law and the prophets. Yep. I'm sorry. Somebody else said something. He treats us right even when we treat him wrong, doesn't he? Yeah. Even though they ignore him. But I often thought this probably was maybe the origination of the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. here is treat people the same way you want them to treat you. Seems similar. But he's talking to these people, and he's talking to them in a way they haven't heard before, have they? They're listening to this and going, okay, I knew the thing about God and asking, but boy, treating somebody else the way I want to be treated, that's kind of new for these folks. What was one of the things that they talked about? An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. And he said, no, that's not the way you should be. This is different for these people. Two paths, false teachers. So the next part in the sermon is talking about the two different paths people take. Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide, and the way is broad that leads to destruction. There are many who enter through it. For the gate is narrow, and the way is constricted that leads to life, and there are few who find it. So what's these two gates he's contrasting? Truth and a lie, yeah. Yeah. If it's man's way, that's a wide gate. A lot of different ways you can go. Yeah, it changes. What situation ethics could drive that, as opposed to God's way is the truth, which is what Paul said. There is one truth. That's one thing about truth. It doesn't change. It stays the same. It's constant. Beware of the false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Grapes are not gathered from thorn bushes, nor figs from thistles, are they? So every good tree bears good fruit, but the bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown in the fire. So then you will know them by their fruits. How would you summarize what he said there? Yeah, action speak. Yeah. Watch what they're doing. Watch what the results are. Watch to see what growth there's going. Who gives the growth to the church? God, okay? And if there's no growth, there's no fruits that are coming as a result of that, that's an indication. Actions speak louder than words, which is what Clayton said. It certainly does. It says you can see them by what their fruits are, what they produce. The Sanhedrin would be a good example of what you're talking about. The upper class of the Jewish society certainly would be the Sanhedrin, as far as what they did and how they ran things. There were 70 of them in there. And the fruits that they had, what was one of the biggest fruits they had? They killed Christ. Look at the fruit. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven will enter. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? And in your name cast out demons, and in your name perform many miracles. Then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Leave me, you who practice lawlessness. Okay, they cast out demons. They prophesied in God's name. They did miracles, whatever those miracles may be. Excuse me? Exactly. It's all about motivation. We've talked about that before. The person, Simon the sorcerer, what was his whole thrust? Remember? Simon, what did Simon want to do? Yeah, sell that to me so I can go ahead and do it. Okay. His motivation was to make money. The motivation was to say, look at me. Okay. And I think that's what Christ's talking about is Somebody who does all those things, but they did that to not to magnify God, but to magnify themselves. And it all comes down to motivation. Why are you doing what you do? Do you do it to be seen, to be praised, or do you do it because you want to serve God? Because you want to bring people into his kingdom and show his truth and his light to the world. That's the whole difference between the two. In Luke, complementary to what's going on in Matthew, for there is no good tree that bears bad fruit, nor on the other hand a bad tree that bears good fruit. For each tree is known by its fruit. For people do not gather figs nor thorns from thorns, nor do they grapes from briar bush. The good person out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth what is good, and the evil person of the evil treasure brings out forth what is evil. For his mouth speaks from that which fills his heart. So here, Luke captured a little bit more of what Christ said as to why, and it goes to the motivation. In that last part in 45, the good person out of good treasure of his heart brings forth what is good. It's about your heart. It's about your motivation. Are you doing it because you love yourself? Or are you doing it because you love God? And again, for some of the new folks in here, if it's in white, it's out of Matthew. If it's yellow, it's out of Luke. So just the way you can keep track of the two. Two builders. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise man who built his house on a rock. And the rain fell and the floods came, the winds blew and slammed against the house, and yet it did not fall, for it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act to them will be like the foolish man who built his house on the sand. Kind of sounds like Florida, everything's sand. And the rain fell and the floods came and the winds blew and slammed against the house, and it fell, and its collapse was great. When Jesus finished these words, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, for he was teaching them as one who had authority and not as the scribes. So who's the rock? Jesus, okay? Should this ring a bell to some of them that are in the crowd, the Jews? Why? What book would have introduced him to that? The Old Testament. You have the one that had the most prophecy in it. It was 3. And I know it's in Isaiah. I know it's in Psalms. I'd have to look at Zechariah again. And in one of my favorite books, Daniel. Remember the big statue and the stone that came in that was not made with hands and smashed the statue? Should have rung a bell with some of those folks. He's talking about the foundation. If you build your foundation on reaching God based on man's principles, which is the sand, that house isn't going to stand. But if you build your approach to approaching God based on Christ, you'll find God. That's what he's saying. Now, I'm not sure how many people understood it, because this is the beginning of his ministry. And he's speaking some things that the people are going, that sounds really, really good. But I've never heard that before. How did the scribes teach? Huh? Well, that, and also they had the law, the interpretation of the law, and the interpretation of the law. That's what they did. They read it. They didn't really necessarily explain it. What was the ongoing philosophy throughout the Jewish community as far as who was of God and who was not of God? Rich and poor. If you were rich, you must really be strong with God. And if you're poor, you're in sad shape. And Christ kind of came, particularly when we talked about the Beatitudes, and he kind of said, no, I'm going to turn that upside down. It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to get to heaven. This had to shock these people. That's something they never heard from the scribes. In Luke, now why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say? Everyone who comes to me and hears my words and acts on them, I will show you whom he is like. He is like a man building a house who dug deep and laid a foundation on the rock. And when there was a flood, the river burst against the house, and yet it could not shake it, because it had been well built. But the one who was heard and was not acted accordingly is like a man who built a house on the ground without foundation. The river burst against it, and it was immediate collapsed, and the ruin of that house was great. So it's the same thing in Luke, the same thought. But he talks a little bit more about it. You heard the word of God. But if you're building your salvation on something else besides what you heard, it's not going to stand. It goes into a little bit more of a understanding of where he's coming from when it was written in Luke than when it was written in Matthew. Huh? Yep. So, that's the end of the sermon, the two sermons. One was the sermon on the plain, and one was the sermon on the mountain. And they were basically parallel. We don't know how many sermons he gave, but I guarantee you he gave a lot. We've really just got those two and another one that's recorded in the Bible. But now we're going to go look at the preaching in Galilee. In other words, after he's got through this sermon, it's the things that a few things that happen then. We'll see how far we get. Healings. Various healings that he started to do. He's already done a lot of healings, but this one particular one here with Matthew and Luke picks up on a few more. When Jesus came down from the mountain, large crowds followed him, and a leper came to him and bowed down before him and said, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, I am willing, be cleansed. And immediately the leprosy was cleansed. And Jesus said to him, see that you tell no one, but go, show yourself to the priest, and present the offering that Moses' commandment as a testimony to them. So what's leprosy? Don't say a disease. I know it's a disease. It's a bacterial infection in your skin. They didn't have antibiotics then to really fight it. Okay? And it continues till it basically eats you up. So, this man came to him. I imagine the crowd kind of moved back a little bit, depending on how severe his leprosy had progressed. Huh? Well, it took that, and also that, to me, is kind of an act of desperation, which to me says it was probably pretty well advanced leprosy. And with leprosy, you were supposed to keep everything shaved. You were supposed to be exposed enough where people could see you had it and everything else like that. It's interesting, his question. How does he phrase his question? Yeah. But he comes to Christ. If he came to Christ, he says, if you are willing. That's humility. This man is really, really down. Now, when I said the difference between rich and poor, well, you take another step from being poor if you've got leprosy. You're cursed by God, okay? You must have done something horrible in your life that you got that, which was the prevailing philosophy. Yeah, but he says, if you are willing. To me, that was humility. The man said, I have something so severe. I'm so ostracized from society. I'm so far from God. But if you're willing, you can make me. The man had faith that Christ could make him clean. But he didn't really think he could approach him because of his station in life. We kind of get there sometimes, don't we? I've done something so rotten, I can't really approach God. This kind of says, don't think that way. You can always approach God. No matter what you've done, you can always approach God. Leprosy. What did he have to do? What did this guy have to do? Got any idea? He had to go to the priest and follow what Moses had said. There's a lot he had to go do. There's two paths he could take. One path was a guy or a person who had enough money to do it, and one was if you were poor. And they're in Leviticus, which we study a lot, right? Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "This shall be the law of the leper in the day of his cleansing." So this is the area where it talks about. "Now he shall be brought to the priest, and the priest shall go out to the outside of the camp. Thus the priest shall look, and if the infection of leprosy has been healed in the leper, then the priest shall give orders to take 2 live clean birds and a cedar wood and scarlet hyssop string and hyssop for the one who is to be cleansed. The priest shall give orders to slay the one bird in an earthenware vessel over running water. As for the live bird, he shall take it together with the cedar wood and the scarlet string and the hyssop, and shall dip them in the live bird, in the blood of the bird that was slain over the running water." That's the first part. "Then he shall sprinkle 7 times the one who is cleansed from leprosy, and shall pronounce him clean, and shall let the live bird go free over an open field. The one to be cleansed shall then wash his clothes and shave off all his hair and bathe in water and be clean. And afterward he may enter the camp, but he shall stay outside of his tent for 7 days. And on the 7th day, he shall shave off all of his hair. He shall shave his head, his beard, his eyebrows, even all his hair. Then he shall wash his clothes and bathe his water in water and be clean." So there's a lot of cleansing, a lot of shaving. On the 8th day, he ain't done. On the 8th day, he is to take 2 male lambs without defect and a yearling ewe lamb without defect, and 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil for a grain offering, and 1 log of oil. And the priest who pronounces him clean shall present the man to be cleansed and the aforesaid before the Lord at the doorway of the tent of meeting. Then the priest shall take the 1 male lamb and bring it for a guilt offering with a log of oil, and present them as a wave offering before the Lord. Next, he shall slaughter the male lamb in the place where they slaughter the sin offering and the burnt offering at the place of the sanctuary. For the guilt offering, like the sin offering, belongs to the priest. It is the most holy. The priest then shall take some of the blood of the guilt offering, and the priest shall put it on the lobe of the right ear of the one to be cleansed, and on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. It's a lot of things to do, okay? It takes 8 days, huh? Why would they go through all this cleansing and all this shaving? That priest is going to go over every square centimeter of that guy's body looking for an infection. And he's going to be doing it for that many days in a row. The priest shall take some of the log of oil and pour it on his left palm. The priest then shall dip his right hand finger in the oil that is in the left palm. Hopefully they keep track of their left and their right. And with his finger sprinkle some of the oil 7 times before the Lord. By the way, what does the number 7 represent? Completeness. Of the remaining oil which is in his palm, the priest shall put some on the right earlobe of the one to be cleansed, and on the thumb of the right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot, on the blood of the guilt offering. While the rest of the oil that is in the priest's palm, he shall put it on the head of the one to be cleansed. So the priest shall make atonement on behalf before the Lord. The priest shall next offer the sin offering and make atonement for the one to be cleansed from his uncleanness. Then afterward, he shall slaughter the burnt offering. That's for the person who has the money to buy the lamb and everything else that has to go through it. But you can kind of see maybe all this that has to go on for a sin offering and a guilt offering and like that, why the people thought, well, if you've got leprosy, you must have done something really, really wrong. For the guy who's poor, but if he is poor and his means are insufficient, Then he is to take one male lamb for a guilt offering as a wave offering to make atonement for him, and 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour, as opposed to, I think, 3/10, or 3/5, mixed with oil for a grain offering and a log of oil. And 2 turtle doves, or 2 young pigeons, which are within his means, the one shall be a sin offering and the other a burnt offering. Then on the 8th day he shall bring them for his cleansing to the priest at the doorway of the tent of the meeting before the Lord. The priest shall take the lamb of the guilt offering and the log of oil, and the priest shall offer them for a wave offering before the Lord. Next he shall slaughter the lamb of the guilt offering, and the priest is to take some of the blood of the guilt offering and put it on the lobe of the right ear of the one who is to be cleansed, and the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. So it's similar, but it isn't the same amount of sacrifices that they had. But you can kind of see it is a big, what Christ just said, go to show yourself to the priest and follow the law of Moses. This is what Moses got from God to say, someone's cleansed, this is the ritual you have to go through before you're accepted back into society. Otherwise, you can't live in society. Until you go through all this, you can't be accepted back into society. The priest shall also pour some of the oil in his left palm, and with his right hand finger the priest shall sprinkle some of the oil in his left palm. So it's basically the same kind of thing that he goes through as far as the oil and which hand and which toe and which earlobe and everything goes on as far as the offerings to go through. But it is a big, big, drawn-out, 8-day situation that you have to go through in order to be accepted. So just a little perspective on that particular little bitty verse in Matthew where it says, go show yourself to the priest and follow Moses. There's a lot to it. Whoop, that was interesting. It just locked up and went all the way through. Can you get me back to page, I don't know, probably 40? Yeah, I can go back. Oops. And when Jesus entered Capernaum, the centurion came to him, imploring him and saying, Lord, my servant is lying paralyzed at home, fearfully tormented. Jesus said to him, I will come and heal him. But the centurion said, Lord, I am not worthy for you to come under my roof, but just say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. And I say to this one, go, and he goes. And to another, come, and he comes. And to my slave, do this, and he does it. Have believed. And the servant was healed that very moment. So, what's unusual about who just came to him? Who just came to him? A Roman soldier, a centurion. If he's a centurion, how many people is there over? 100. He's a centurion. Just like a century is 100 years. Okay? So, how do the Jews feel about the Romans? They hate them. They don't like being underneath the rule of the Romans. They want to be independent. How does Christ respond? I'll come do it. And the Roman says, you don't have to. You just say the word. Now, when Jesus heard this, he marveled and said to those who were following, which are the disciples, truly I say to you, I have not found such great faith with anyone in Israel. Can you imagine their shock when he responds to the centurion? He says, I'll go do it. And now he's taken the centurion and said, I haven't sent anybody with the faith of this man anywhere in Israel. What do you think is going on in the disciples' minds? What? He's a Roman. He's a pagan. kind of shows something that's coming in the future. Christ talks about it later when he talks about, I have other sheep. This is kind of a preview. Go ahead.
Well, you can let me know what you think about this. So the centurion, although he had faith, or maybe he didn't, or maybe he had seen things that had happened with Christ, did he keep that hid from people, the Romans that he worked with and for, that he had faith in Christ?
Yeah, it's interesting that he responded to the centurion, I think, the way he did, because later on, when the woman comes to him asking for her sins to be forgiven. Remember when she came to the table? And she said she's asking for that forgiveness, and he says it's not good to provide food for the dogs, which is the pagans, which is the Gentiles. And she says, yes, but even the crumbs fall on the floor. He saw her faith, and he responded back. Faith and belief is what God's looking for. And he found it in the centurion, in a place where most people wouldn't have expected it. Also, with the centurion, he said something that everybody else said, oh, I didn't understand. They thought it was because he touched them. He had to be there physically. He had to do something physically. They limited the power of the Holy Spirit working in Christ, and they didn't understand just how powerful it was. The centurion had an idea. It was a lot more powerful than what they thought. And he said, and he knew, I'm not worthy. Don't come to my place. I'm not worthy. Just say the word.
He's admitting he's a sinner. And in that certain time, certain people didn't admit they were wrong.
And you talked about it earlier, Clayton, when you said it's motivation. Where was his heart? This was a servant of his. He had lots of servants. He had 100 guys underneath him. But he went out of his way from where he lived to go talk to Christ to say, hey, I have somebody who needs to be healed. Luke talks about it. When he had completed all his discourse in the hearing of the people, he went to Capernaum. And a centurion's slave, who was highly regarded by him, was sick and about to die. So it's a little bit different in Luke. When he heard about Jesus, he sent some Jewish elders asking him to come and to save the life of the slave. When they came to Jesus, they earnestly implored him, saying, He is worthy for you to grant this to him. For he loves our nation, and it is he who built our synagogue. So you get a little bit more of Luke to say what this centurion's like. He's someone who loves the Jewish people. Now, Jesus started on his way to them, and when he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends, saying to him, Lord, do not trouble yourself further, for I am not worthy for you to come under my roof. For this reason, I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you, but just say the word, and my servant will be healed. So a little different slant on what you have in Luke. For I am also a man placed under authority. So it has the same thing there. And in verse 10, when those that had been sent returned to the house, they found the slave in good health. So you see how Matthew and Luke interpreted it. Was Matthew there? Do this. Matthew was there. Was Luke there? No. Luke was not there.
All seen it and probably thought about it. The fact they even cared for his servant enough to do this. Because back then, servants were kind of disposable, I would assume.
In a lot of society they were, particularly in pagan society. But this centurion was different, a lot different than what the normal Roman was. Raising the widow's son. This is the second. This is not the second one. This is about the third or fourth one we have recorded. We don't know how many people he's healed. But this is a little bit differently. This is not necessarily being healed. Soon afterwards, he went to a city called Nain, and his disciples were going along with him, accompanied by a large crowd. Now as he approached the gate of the city, a dead man was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow, and a sizable crowd from the city was with her. When the Lord saw her, he felt compassion for her and said to her, "Do not weep." And he came up and he touched the coffin, and the bearers came to halt. And he said, "Young man, I say to you, arise." The dead man sat up and began to speak, and Jesus gave him back to his mother. Fear gripped them all, and they began glorifying God, saying, "A great prophet has arisen among us, and God has visited his people." This report concerning him went out all over Judea and in the surrounding district. What was different about this? I'm sorry.
Christ felt compassion. That
Yeah,
statement
I think he
has
felt
to be-
compassion for everybody. Even people don't deserve it like us.
I'm looking for him. He's seen this. This just happened to pass by.
Okay. So far, we have, I don't have a recording, but I suspect he's cast out demons. And he's done a lot of healing. Whether you're paralyzed, whether you're blind, whether you're leprosy or something like that. This is the first one, I believe, where he's raised the dead. And in Jewish society, I think there's a few days you have after someone's died before he's buried, but you have to bury him fairly quickly. But this is the first dead being raised. Who believed that God could raise someone from the dead that we have first? I'll give you a clue. His son's name was Isaac. Abraham. Remember when Abraham went to sacrifice his son? He was going to kill him. What did he believe? God will raise him back from the dead. Here you have him raising someone from the dead, and people go, they're afraid. Why?
Come on.
Huh?
He's in a casket. It reminds me of Count Dracula.
They're on the way to put him in the ground or put him in a cave and roll a rock in front of it. But this is the kind of power they haven't seen. Why did Christ have that power? I'm not around the time. Why did Christ have that power? Did he come to heal physically people? No. It came to show that he had the authority of God. That's why he came with that power. What I'm telling you is the truth. And to show you it's the truth, and I have the authority, look what God gave me the ability to do through the Spirit. You could see God's will being done through Christ with the Holy Spirit. All three working together as one. For whose benefit? Ours. It wasn't the benefit of Christ to go to the cross, was it? It was ours. Inquiry from John the Baptist's followers. I think we've got about 2 minutes. When Jesus had finished giving instructions to his 12 disciples, he departed from there to teach and to preach in the cities. Now, when John, while imprisoned, heard of the works of Christ, he sent word by his disciples and said to him, "Are you the expected one, or shall we look for someone else?" Jesus answered and said to them, "Go and report to John what you hear and see. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear. The dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached to them. And blessed is he who does not take offense at me." So what's the relationship between John and Christ? Cousins. Okay? Remember when they first met? John was in Elizabeth. Christ was in Mary. Through the Holy Spirit. I'm sure Elizabeth didn't care for it that much, but he leaped for joy. Well, still in the womb. He was about 6 months older than Christ. They knew each other growing up. He baptized Christ. Why is he asking this question? The question is, are you the expected one, or should we look for someone else? Why is he asking that question?
There could be a lot of reasons, but I think because it's not what everybody expects, you know.
That's true. If the expectation was
Hear
to
about
have a
something,
super
we
David.
assume it's going to be like something, but then it's not like what we expect.
Yeah, the expectation was super David. But with John the Baptist, what kind of life did John live?
Lived in the woods.
Yeah, he's out in the desert, wandering around.
He'd never
warm,
seen him before, so he didn't know.
Camel skin.
He didn't see it. He's never met him before, so.
Yeah, he didn't what?
Met Jesus before.
No, he hadn't met Jesus. He baptized Jesus.
No, I mean in the womb. So you were saying, you were asking, why did he ask, are you the one?
Where is John right now? He's in prison.
He knows he's fixing to die.
He knows he's fixing to die, and in his mind he's saying, please assure me you're the one.
Well, because they're doubting. It's not working out. They thought it would be good. Right now, everything looks bad.
Well,
So
yeah,
they're
it was the timing for Christ to come. But I think what's going on in John's mind, and I'll go ahead and wrap up here on this particular one. I think what's going on in John's mind is to say, I have faith that it's you. But I need you to say it and affirm it again, just so I can go to my death saying, he came. I did what I was supposed to do. I was the one heralding the one that was coming. And I think that's what's going on in John's mind. That's why he asked the question, to strengthen his faith. And Christ says, look at what's happened. The truth is being told. The gospel, that's the biggest thing. The poor have the gospel preached to them. He's doing all these miracles. But the truth is out there now. And I'm the one who's bringing it. Thanks for your attention. Appreciate it.
Sing the wondrous